Welcome everybody. I thought I would do this tutorial or overview of how I remixed James Hype and Major Lazer's number one because this is a process I do all the time, and therefore I thought it might be useful to other people when they are thinking of doing a remix and they're not really sure how to approach it. So as you can see here, let's get into it. This is a pretty empty door. All I've done here is bring the stems in raw from James Hype himself. So let's have a quick listen to that. Okay, cool. It's at 127, so I'm going to obviously turn this into DnB. I know James has had a rocky history with DnB, let's say. Wasn't always into it, but is now definitely putting drum and bass into his sets most recently. So first thing we're going to do is, of course, up the tempo, which is going to make it sound awful. Yeah, as fun as that is, we don't really want that. So what we're going to do is, of course, start removing things. So we're going to remove the kick, and I'm actually just going to hide it for now. Remove the drums, again, going to hide that for now as well, which just leaves us with the vocal, the bass, some noise. This is actually crowd noise. I don't know whether other people know this, but James Hype seems to put in not fake crowd noise, but crowd noise stimulant, crowd noise support, I guess, so that when the drop happens, there is a little bit of a, happening in the background, which is cool, interesting and stuff. And then, of course, you've got this lead here, which is the actual main melody. So, as you can see here, there are these three tracks here, and these are me simply just bringing in some existing drum and bass drum loops just to see whether this even works. So if we turn these on the right hand side here and just listen to the track as it is. And that's all I needed to really give me the impression that there was something here. There was something that could be done with this song as a drum and bass song. So let's move on. I will now open up the next version that I saved out, and this is going to be a mess. So you will see that, in fact, this is actually a little bit further ahead. Let me load up this one. So you will see that when the stems come in, they're all multicolored and, quite messy to kind of like look at. So this version here is essentially me starting to think of what to do with the track and starting to rewrite some bits that were already in the original track into MIDI. So you'll see I've actually hidden the bass here, which was simply this, which is nothing, right? Just a very low whoop, 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 whoop. So now I've started to rewrite that with this sub line here. So these two are kind of like connected. Underneath this, I've got my drum loop, which I'd originally put in there. And I've started to think about other noises, and I've actually started to rewrite the lead using different instruments. So here's another one. So you can see that I'm trying to now think of how can I elevate the song and do something different with it. The first thing being that I thought that these stabs would sound really good. So kind of like, maybe not stabs at this point in the song, but kind of like a reese that goes underneath it. Now, of course, this is just throwing everything at the wall, which is why it's really messy. It's all over the place. I'm trying like various different things. It's like new bass lines and stuff. I don't know what this is. I've got it turned off, so I didn't think it was very good. Oh, that's nothing. Oh, it's a fake gap that I've put in there. Fine. But you can see when it all kind of, when you turn it all on, it sounds a bit like this, and it's going to sound rubbish. But there is something there. Mainly this particular note here. So this note here, that's the one that's doing something to the track in my ear. So the drums are going, there's a big gap where there's this big filthy, and then it goes bum 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 bum, and that is basically the inspiration for this song. So let's go back to the version that I accidentally loaded just earlier, and you'll see that that main motif has now carried through, and I'm now starting to arrange and orchestrate my track here. So firstly, color coordination, right? So for me, I go spectrum, you know, rainbow, you know, all the way down. I think most people do this actually. So, you know, my vocals will always be in red, my drums will always be in orange, my bass will always be in yellow. So I've basically got vocals, drum and bass, and then I've got my my bass line, another bass line which I call through bass, which is bass that I want to come across the entire spectrum of the frequency, as opposed to this bass line here, which actually I will cut off so it doesn't interfere with the mid-range and the high range. So yeah, my through bass is something which will permeate throughout the entire spectrum there. Then we've got our lead. So this is, as you can see, the original sample here for the lead, and also a supporting MIDI for it underneath. So put those two things together and it sounds like this. And I've actually input some additional ones in here as well. So now that iconic lead that you know and love when you hear it in the club will be different. It'll be elevated, it's got that extra bass bit in there, and also the extra like high end on it as well. So yeah, then the final thing we have is our tops, which are completely original and things that I'm adding in there to try and make the track a little bit more interesting, as well as the old noise stuff that James put in. So with this all put together, it sounds like this. And this point here was gotten to after 2 hours, I think it was. So obviously, you know, the rewriting takes a little bit of time, but you know, actually it's mostly all the same. Same with these as well. They are mostly the same. And in general, you know, I've now started to kind of structure the track. So you'll see that I've cut the vocal up in order for it to fit a different type of drop, and also to fit a different time length for the actual track. So this track currently, this is rubbish. This is stuff I'm not actually going to use. So the actual track finishes like around here, you know. So that is 3 minutes 40. If you look back at the original stems that were brought in, it's actually 4 minutes 20. And when you change that, and that's at 174, when it was at 127, it was actually a 5-minute 45 song, which is long, right? You know, it's not potentially going to get airplay like that. It's a great club track. But for drum and bass, you know, for something that I want to mix with other tracks that I've got in my collection. You know, 3 minute, 4 minute is about the right kind of length. And you'll see when you are writing and arranging a track, you know, this section here, the main chorus, is really a duplicate of this section here. I mean, you're going to do more stuff in the second drop than you are in the first drop. So really, we can actually remove this. So what we should be working on is this section here, and also the intro, or the build up, and therefore this section here can be removed, and this is pretty much a recreation of this section here. So, you know, when you're first arranging a track and first wondering what to do, you know, this is what you should be working on. In actual fact, you should be working on like this. Work on this amount of work. The build up and then the first drop. And then everything beyond that is, you know, an extension of the first chorus, the breakdown, the intro, and then a duplicate of the first drop, and probably an outro here as well, that which isn't in there just yet. So very basic, you know. It looks like there's a lot of stuff here, there's a lot of tracks here. There's not. Actually, you know, the main work was done here, and then extended, done a breakdown, and then copied and pasted over to the other side. Okay, so let's continue on. Let's have a look at the next version that I had evolved. So already that was sounding okay. It was definitely something, you know, there, of course. Let's listen to this version now. So this version here I actually was pretty happy with. You know, if we move on, I've actually added additional elements in here. You know, it's very raucous and raw, and, you know, there's horrible, you know, everything's too loud and all that kind of stuff. This is the breakdown. And you can see I've started doing this kind of stuff here, building the intro up with additional MIDI. So you can see we're now starting to think of this as what the final arrangement is going to be. You know, everything is pretty raw at the moment, as I said, so there's nothing on the vocals whatsoever. There's nothing on the drums. I'm doing a bit of EQ on various elements here. The sub as I'm ducking it for the kick and the snare, and then falling it off for the rest of the spectrum. The bass is doing similarly. The through bass doesn't have anything on. I'm starting to do some automation on here. As you can see, let's which one actually is it? Yeah, here we go. It's one of the macros within Serum. I'm starting to do some automation here, etc, etc, and the master has now started to have a few things on there, including a little bit of ozone, my LUFS meter. Bring it over here. This is my LUFS meter, basically telling me how loud the track is going to be. Q3, which is the Fab Filter plugin, allowing me to basically see the spectral analysis of my track without actually doing anything, you know, in there. Just a really good visualizer for now. I also quite like to have a little bit of additional, just a little gain up in that top range, so there's a little EQ lift up at the end there. And then this final EQ here is actually my iPhone test. So basically, if you put in a curve like this, essentially this will tell you whether your song sounds good on speakers that don't have like a sub, and speakers which only have a very limited frequency, so you can kind of listen to it on iPhone. This is off, this is on, sorry. Back on again. I mean, I don't think iPhone speakers are that bad, to be honest, but if it sounds good there, it's going to sound great everywhere else, basically. So let's move on with the next version that I'd saved out. I would say this was probably done the next day. So the first, couple of Abletons we went through took about 2 hours to get to kind of an idea. This and the next few ones were probably the next day, I believe, as I was kind of experimenting with things and having slept on it, coming back to it the next day, seeing if it still actually was like a good idea. So let's take a listen to this version now. Right. So I wanted to show you this version, because this is the version where you start doubting yourself and you start thinking, oh my god, is this actually any good? So yeah, this was obviously the next day, and I've obviously thought, maybe it wasn't as good as I thought. Let's go back and kind of like redo some things. You can see I've added these sections in here. I'm not quite sure even what this was. I don't think I used this in the end. Okay, so this is where I'd actually rewritten this recycle. Yeah, so I loved that, but I thought, am I getting too attached to that specific noise? And therefore I rewrote that as myself in MIDI, so like that. I rewrote that myself, and as you can hear, like, it wasn't good, and I didn't actually end up using this. But it's a good demonstration of the fact that sometimes you doubt yourself and you get it wrong, and actually you should have stuck with your guns, because the original was actually still pretty damn good. So yeah, this version, actually, I think I got rid of it and didn't actually use it in the end. So moving on, other than that, nothing else was really done. Like, the intro is still the intro, this stuff is still there because I thought I might need it. These are all just like vocal chops that were in the original lead, and I didn't actually end up using them in the end. But let's move on to the next version, which should be E. Yeah, there we go. So this was essentially abandoned, and I moved on to starting to think about a proper intro. So, James is a house DJ, right? So the chances of him playing drum and bass are slim, but when he does, in his sets, he likes the big moments, especially with his Moving Differently series that's on YouTube right now, where he's covering, his Ibiza residency at High Ibiza. There's many, many videos out there, therefore, of these big moments, like the hand in the air like that, the tension in the air from the crowd, and he's doing something on there, either, messing with the cues, or the gated hot cues now, if you've got a 3000X, or like he's transforming a song that people know and love into something else. So this was a prime example of wanting to do the same kind of thing. So, I've written a brand new intro here, which should be that moment and allow him to transition from a house song into a drum and bass song. So let's have a quick listen to this. So going for quite a ethereal, majestic, atmospheric, cinematic kind of moment in the club, before it then kicks in with and then off we go to the races. So how have I done that? So basically I've got this very long it's a cello, I do come from a background of kind of classical music, so in an orchestra, in a kind of film soundtrack or something like that, you know, a very low cello just going whoa, like that, or like a double bass or something, you know, is how you make that kind of tension in the scoring of a film composition or something like that. So I'm using Soundbox's, Audio Motion's Soundbox for that, and using the cello tremolo. So that is specifically not a cello which is just doing a long bow string, bow movement. It's going and actually kind of wobbling as it does that. So like that with the actual with the bow on the strings. So that is creating an unsettling atmosphere like underneath there. And then on top of that, we've then got strings. So again, Audio Motion Soundbox, this time using a cello in a higher octave. So this is definitely a high octave for a cello. A cello is usually probably an octave below that. And then on top of that, we've then got this long note here, which is actually atmospherics. So just adding in kind of, again, just more tension, but in a slightly higher octave range, in that mid-range above the cello. And then we've got a lot of these kind of like, you know, FX. So we didn't see this in the previous Ableton Live set. All this pink stuff here is brand new stuff that I've added. You know, I don't really see this as much in house music, but in drum and bass you do quite a lot of uplifters, downlifters, swooshes, impacts, you know, all of that kind of stuff, and it adds absolutely quite a lot into the mix. So for example, we've got this big kind of like thing happening there, and then we are introducing a choir. So again, adding in that kind of like big ethereal, religious, spiritual, uplifting kind of experience. But as you can hear, it's got a wobble to it, so it's not quite dissonant or discordant, but it is adding a sense of moment to, you know, this thing that's happening. And then obviously we're kind of supporting that with stuff in the bass as well. Again, so this kind of like you know, a bass which has got a little bit of LFO on it, and then the sub. So just adding in a heartbeat, almost like a boom, boom, like that. So of course, yeah, when you put it all together, it makes something, you know, quite cinematic. In fact, I'll turn off the vocals so you can just hear just that. Move my mouse. Yeah, so there you go. That is how I started to actually, you know, think of this as like a brand new track, you know, thinking of not just the remix of it, but thinking how it would appear like in the club. So yes, as we go through here, you see I added these little elements in here just to give it a bit of energy. One thing I kind of try to do is turn the drums off, and if the song still has beat and rhythm and energy, then you know you're doing well. So if you listen here, so that, and we're actually getting that through the sub. We're getting it through the bass. We're getting it through this mid-range here. And we're actually getting it through this this lead here. So even when the drums aren't there, there's something driving the actual track forward. Okay, that is the penultimate version, and then this is now the final version. So you can see I've actually put markers in on this particular, this is the first time I put the markers in on this particular set. So I'm marking my song start, the first drop, the breakdown, the second drop, and the song end. And now you can see that, yeah, we have a just shy of 3-minute 40 long song, but we're not starting until here. So that's roughly 15 seconds. So the total time for this track is about 3:30 or something like that, which is absolutely perfect. And now it's really now about mixing and mastering the actual track itself. So, we've got like the EQ that was on the drums before is like being ripped apart and is being changed. I'm taking it down -6 as well. There's more EQ here. I'm using Valhalla Supermassive to actually give a little bit of reverb on the snare in some cases. The percussion as well is not interfering with anything. It actually drops off before the snare even kicks in. Same with the hi-hat. Same with the this break loop that I've put in there. We've got the drum fills in there. The sub's dropping off quite rapidly, more than it was previously. Our bass is literally just in that not central, just left of center section there, not interfering with our sub, not interfering with our the higher mid-range and our lead and our vocals. We've then got our through bass, as I said, which has got a little bit of compression happening here, some OTT to just give it a bit more rawness, and again we're kind of gain staging, so we're -15 dB here. We've got a bunch of automation on 3 different macros here as well. More of this, you know, making sure it doesn't interfere with the bass, making sure it doesn't interfere with the snare, so that, pardon me, so that kick and that sorry, I meant kick. That kick and that snare are always coming through no matter what. A horn has been added in here that wasn't in there previously, so we've got this big kind of like, reminds me of June actually, and that is being automated over time as well. We've got our mid-range, which again is not cutting into any of our snare or below. There's actually only one thing in the mid-range there. We've got our lead, which really hasn't changed, you know, it really hasn't changed from, you know, the main lead in there. I think there were 4 I showed previously, and now I've just removed one and it's just back down to 3. So again, you probably find yourself removing things, you know, as you go on. If you remember back that first live set I showed you, it was, you know, it was a mess and everything was thrown at the kitchen sink, thrown at the door. I can't remember what the phrase is. And now you're actually removing things and making it a lot cleaner sounding. This was the kind of like one thing I added in here, which, let's have a listen to that. And that was added specifically because, you know, we're splitting our chorus, you know, this whole chorus here, this drop here, we're splitting it into 3 really. So hopefully you can see that there's something happening in the first third, in the first 16 bars. There's something happening in the second 16 bars. If I can just scroll, come on, scroll. Okay, I'll scroll down. Yeah, something happening in the second 16 bars, and then there's something happening in the last 16 bars as well. So every 16 bars, something is changing, which is something we always talk about during the live sessions on the Pete Tong DJ Academy. So keeping it new, keeping it evolving, etc., etc. Where do we get up to? Leads. Yeah, I mean, I could go through every single track here. There's EQ and compression on basically every single section of this. A bit of clipping on this particular track as well. In the tops, again, the tops don't interfere with anything. Compression and automation and EQ happening on all of these. A bit more Valhalla Supermassive. You're probably wondering why I don't put it on the one of the send and return tracks. I do, but sometimes I want a different sound to come through on that particular reverb. So although there is some sense, you know, down here to this particular one here, sometimes you want a different sound, and therefore I'm putting a very specific one on, you know, wherever it was, this one here. Personal choice, right? You know, there is a one way which glues it all together, and there's another way which is your own personal, you know, sonic choice that you want in there. And then yeah, all this purple stuff is essentially brand new FX and ambience that was added. In actual fact, the old stuff, the noise, the kind of like crowd sample noise, like, is completely gone. All the original stems have all gone as well. You'll see that they've all completely disappeared. So yeah, this is the final track. The master channel essentially is putting the bass in mono, which you have to do. Like, I don't know why it should be default in Ableton. Within Ozone, I'm doing loads of stuff. So can I make this longer? Yeah, I can make this longer. Right, so there we go. So more EQ happening, a bit of impact to make the whole song sound better in very specific sections of the frequency. Spectral imaging as well on various parts to give a really wide sound in some areas and a really narrow sound in others. Clarity is a new one. I think it's in, I don't know when it started. I think it might have been started in Ozone 11. It's definitely in there in Ozone 12 as well, which is really useful. I actually use it on vocals quite a lot, actually, but I've put it on the master channel here as well. Stabilizer and dynamic EQ just for very specific, I mean, we're doing EQ all over the place, right? But dynamic EQ on these specific areas just to ensure that that does come through. But when it goes over a certain amount, it actually then dips down. And then maximizer really is to ensure that I can now start pushing the volume level up to where I want it to be, which is basically about -5 LUFS, -4.5. In fact, like, let's quickly see what it actually yeah, so it actually ended up being -5.5 in the end, and you can see that essentially we're just doing compression on. I mean, if I went through and turned everything off, you'd see the compression is mostly just happening on the kick, on the snare, and probably there's a little bit happening on the through bass, the thing I mentioned, but it's making sure that it maximizes that volume so that without introducing any compression artifacts or making it sound, you know, limited and cut off, etc. So you got to be really careful with that, and thankfully, you know, there's quite a lot of, you know, different things you can do and techniques you can do to actually make sure that you hit that and make it still sound like really, really good. So that's it. That's what it ended up being. That's the final track. I ended up taking this, finding some footage of James Hype playing out and kind of mocking together. In fact, we can probably even open it now, actually. Mocking together what it would look like for him to do this in the club, so that I could see myself whether it would work, right? You know, as I said, he is a house DJ, so, you know, making sure that it looked like what I would expect it to feel like in the club, I thought that was quite a good way of doing it. So I think if we look here, so this is him at High Ibiza, one of his previous shows, and he's actually he's winding out an existing house song. So I was like, that's the perfect time for me to now introduce this new remix I've done. So there you go, you'll hear it coming in. You can definitely imagine him doing this. The crowd's waiting for that moment. They recognise the song. They recognise, oh, this is number 1 by James Hype and Major Lazer. And then all of a sudden, something new, something different, something that's going to excite people. I mean, this doesn't line up, unfortunately. And then off we go. Yeah, I mean, it works, right? You know, so it's not only useful for, you know, a little bit of kind of like viral social media that you can do, but also to make you know that, you know, this is where this music is going to go. It's going to go into that club, hopefully, you know, and give you that experience when it's heard. So, you know, this is my personal thing that I do, but other people may find it interesting to do that themselves for any remix that they're also doing. So yeah, there you go. That is the whole thing. I then put it on SoundCloud. So it's over on my SoundCloud if you want to go listen to it. I made the album artwork there as well as some other kind of social media content for it too. Where did I put that? You're having a look at my the insides of my computer at this point, as well as, yeah, these kind of like things I did just for kind of social media posts and stuff like that. Just to, you know, you need to capture people's imagination and keep people's attention on this kind of like stuff. So, yeah, anything that you can do to get that attention from people, I think is all good. So, yeah, there you go. That is how I remixed James Hype and Major Lazer's number 1. It's available on my SoundCloud. Go have a listen to it, and all the best for your remixes that you're doing in your studio.